project area, and we're going to do 2 and 3 somewhat together. So that not because it's the same people at the table. The 9 Line project area and the State Street project area. And I am going to let Danny take it away. Unless, nope, it's all you, Danny.
Thanks for that great introduction, Madam Chair. Members of the board, we appreciate being here today. As Madam Chair said, we're going to combine the 9 Line insofar as considering the interlocal agreements for both the school district and the city, and approving the agency to execute those with both of those entities. We'll speak to the 9 Line first, and then we'll speak to State Street. I'm going to turn the time over to Tammy to give you a brief summary and the background as well as our next steps, and then we will do the same for the State Street project area. We do have a PowerPoint presentation with some additional information if there are any questions or board members would like us to pull that up, and otherwise we will be available for questions at any point or after the item. So with that, I will turn it over to Tammy.
Thank you, Danny. I will give just a quick background on what got us to where we are today and some next steps. So the RDA carried out an extensive, multifaceted, and multi-year project area creation process for both 9 Line and State Street community reinvestment areas, also called CRAs. And this process included significant outreach with community members, community council, local businesses, community development partners, taxing entity partners. We coordinated with internal divisions and departments and other partner agencies. So there were a lot of different players involved in the creation of these project area plans. And then in August of 2018, the RDA board adopted the project area plans for both State Street and 9 Line. And these plans really act as the guiding documents for the utilization of future tax increment to be collected and utilized in the 2 areas, but the plan themselves doesn't guarantee the use of tax increment. That has to be facilitated through the execution of interlocal agreements with each of the participating taxing entities. So since the plans were adopted in the fall of 2018, RDA staff has been negotiating primarily with the school district and Salt Lake County on the terms of their participation for contributing tax increment in the 2 project areas. And we have also negotiated with you, this body acting as the Salt Lake City Council. So where we're at today, it was actually in October of 2019 that the Salt Lake City School Board approved the terms of an interlocal agreement for their participation in both State Street and 9 Line. And last week, the Salt Lake City Council approved the terms of an interlocal on State Street and 9 Line. So where we're at today is we're still having discussions with the county. Those terms have not been wrapped up or finalized. They haven't committed to participate in the project areas yet. We are still having ongoing conversations with them. But we have come to the RDA board today to finalize the approval of the city's participation and the school district's participation. And how that has to happen pursuant to state statute is this body needs to approve a resolution authorizing the terms of participation for both State Street and 9 Line. So you're authorizing the city's interlocal for the 2 project areas and the school district's interlocal for the 2 project areas. And once you approve, or if you approve the resolutions authorizing participation, the next steps include, pursuant to state statute, is RDA staff will route the agreements for execution, and there's a bunch of noticing requirements that we need to go through. And then the interlocals will technically be effective, and we would anticipate, pursuant to the terms, collecting the first year of tax increment in 2021 for the school district and the city. And then next steps also include continuing discussions with the county and hopefully finalizing their terms of participation, and then we'll return to this body to approve an interlocal for the county. So Lauren is standing by with the presentation in case there are any questions on the project area plans or the terms of participation, or we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Tam. At this point, Chris, will you mute yourself? I'm sorry, but I hear feedback. Thank you. Sorry. At this point, I will just open it up for questions to board members. I think that we've seen this presentation a few times over the several years, although for a couple of our new council members, it may just be this last year, but we've seen it a couple of times. But I asked Tammy and Danny to have that presentation ready in case it was easier to explain some of that via the presentation. But for now, I'll just open it up to questions if anybody has any. Darren?
Yeah, thanks. I'm wondering, given that the county may be a little bit of a lag if they do approve their terms, and the collection period is 20 years, does that mean that like the county would potentially start a year later and end a year later, or how does that? Do they all have to start in the same year? Is it okay for them to be different? I'm just wondering the details about that.
It's actually a really interesting question. Part of the timeline built into how we've structured this for approvals from both the council as well as the board is set up so that we could get these done in time to make the official request as part of our November 1 report, which is, as per state statute, what is essentially the initiation of the collection of tax increment. We do that every year for our project areas. And so if we could get these approved and in place prior to that, then that would allow us to pull the trigger on the increment as part of the 2021 tax year. The question you asked of the timing of the county, we don't know if we got that approval from the county later or after that November 1, if we could still potentially include them all together. The conversation right now with the county that are slightly different than what we have included in our agreements with the city and the school district. And so that has been part of what we are trying to negotiate and discuss with the county. Those terms don't necessarily always need to be the same, but depending on what they are, they may add some nuances to how the budget is either calculated or dispersed. And so ideally, you would like to have those all the same. But I think as we move forward with the county, that will be our intention, is to try to make those as close to the same as possible. And then to the extent that we don't, then as Tammy indicated, there's an opportunity to somewhat update and amend the budget accordingly. And primarily as long as the county auditor and everyone assessing the increment understands what those terms are and how they would operate moving forward, then we should be able to factor that into how the tax increment is ultimately calculated. As far as carrying out the plan, that pretty much is already set within the approved plan, and everyone seems to be on the same page as far as what our objectives are. And then to the extent that the county has any other issues that we're not aware of or haven't discussed with them yet that affects that interlocal, then obviously we always have the opportunity to come back to the other entities and either amend the interlocal or, as I said, just take that into consideration as part of the budget.
And Tammy, I know that you explained this a minute ago, but I think you know how I like to put things in layman's terms, and sometimes we speak RDA jargon. For board members, particularly maybe newer board members, that the city and the school board has already signed their part of the interlocal. So this would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tammy, but this would be the board signing its part of that interlocal with both the city and the school board, correct?
Yeah, just to clarify, what the city council did last week was approve the terms of the interlocal. The mayor has yet to sign, but you, as the legislative body, have signed off on executing that agreement. So this is authorizing the agreement through resolution on the RDA side. So we will finalize executing the agreements if you approve the resolutions. And then there are a bunch of noticing requirements that we need to go through to actually trigger the effective date of the interlocal agreements. And just to, if I could, Madam Chair, just to build on what Danny said and add some clarification. Most of our project areas were set up under a format called a taxing entity committee. So all the taxing entities formed a committee and voted together. So the terms from each participating taxing entity were the same. But I believe it was 2014, the state statute changed. And so now we have to execute a separate interlocal agreement with each of the taxing entities. So I don't know what Danny thinks, but this is, from my perspective, been a learning process in kind of coordinating those conversations and coordinating the approvals by all of the taxing entities and the RDA board. And I think we've learned a lot of lessons, and we definitely want to be good partners with all of the taxing entities and are having ongoing conversations on how the process can be streamlined and improved. But it is the goal to try to get all of those terms aligned if possible.
Dan, go ahead.
Thank you. Now, I'm one of those newer members, and I might be one of the slower newer members, but if the county doesn't sign the agreement, does the plan move forward or is it scaled back?
The plan does still move forward. You do still have both the city and the school district who have then agreed to share their increment to carry out that plan. If the county doesn't agree, then essentially what you have is your projected budget of what you would collect in tax increment is obviously less. And so the amount of funds you have available to implement the plan and carry out its mission is smaller. And so you have essentially less money and still the authority to go out and execute the plan.
Okay. And basically after you can work with the county as long as possible, then at some date, maybe November 1st, you say, hey, we're just cutting ties here. We're just going with the school board and the city.
Yeah, there's no set deadline by which we have to finalize negotiations with the county, as much as just ideally it'd be nice to get it done sooner than later so that we can continue to work in conjunction with the other entities. But yeah, if it turns out that they indicate they don't want to participate, then at some point you may just cut off those discussions and move forward without them.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions from board members on this? I would like to say that we're looking for the adoption of this tonight in the formal meeting. So just not tonight. Danny shook his head no.
It's actually
Right now.
right now.
We're looking for it right now.
There's only one RDA meeting and this is it.
I know. Do you know how many times I'm like, we'll do it right now. And then Jen says, no, that's in the formal meeting. And so then I get it right this time and no, of course not.
I don't mean to tell you how to do your job, but we don't have a
You're
meeting scheduled.
telling me how to do my job. What are you talking about? So, board members, we are looking to adopt the two resolutions today. I'd be looking for a motion.
Chair,
Yes,
move,
sir.
I would move for approval of those two.
And Katie, is that fine if we do that? Katie or Allison, is that okay if we do it like that? Or do you need a separate motion for each resolution?
You should be okay to do them together, I would think.
This is Katie, and yes, you can do them together as long as that's the board's intent.
Okay, thanks, Katie.
Madam Chair, I don't mean to interrupt. We've got a couple more people in the attendees chat box that if you would like to give them an opportunity in case they'd like to speak to this. One of them is a call-in user, so we're unable to communicate with them prior. So
Yeah, we will hold board member Rogers' motion and give them a chance to speak, particularly if it's about this. So thank you, Bobby and Amanda.
Sure thing. Thanks, Bobby and Council Chair. We have two people, but one is here to listen. We do have another call-in user. Phone number has 867. I'm going to unmute your mic now, and if you could state your name and then your comment.
I'm just here to listen. Thank you.
Oh, Thank you.
Except for the mattress company.
What was that, George?
Except for the mattress company, if you're still going to ask for public comment on mattress company.
George, at this time, the general comments are for anything on the agenda. And we have agenda item number 8 is the proposed funding for the shoring and stabilization of the mattress company. So I'd be happy to give you 2 minutes to speak to that item if that's what you are interested in speaking to, George.
Okay, real quick, you already know what I think. I already sent you the comments, but bottom line, I urge you before you try to spend $867, I urge you to go through the links that I sent you to show how difficult it is to restore and safely preserve mortar that's over 100 years old. It just is almost impossible. And the mattress company building is not worth it, especially if you're going to have high rises surrounding it. It actually looks way out of place. So I don't think it's worth saving. I urge you to look at what happened with UTA and the locomotive building. They tried to do the same thing, and I think they lost a few $1 million in the process. So please don't spend money on trying to preserve the mattress company. Spend it on preserving the Rio Grande station. That's it.
Thank you, George. Amanda, is there anyone else? It seems like that might be it as far as people.
Oh, Council Chair, that was it as far as people.
Okay, great. We'll go back to these items. And, you know, I do want to say before I take Board Member Rogers's, I don't know why I can't say your name today, James's motion is that I know that the RDA staff and a few of us board members have been meeting with the county, and those meetings have been incredibly productive and really a good conversation to make sure that as we move forward with project areas, that we understand what the goals and objectives are of each of those taxing entities. As the board members know, we want to make sure that we're benefiting the entire community, and that includes our school district and our school board and the county and their needs and objectives as well. And so I know that I want to thank the RDA staff for continuously reaching out and making sure that those conversations are happening and that we're taking into account really what the county is looking for and what their objectives are. And I think it's important for us as board members to continue doing that so that we have, you know, year has been, let's raise up the entire community. That's really what I hope that we can do with each of the taxing entities is really build up the entire community and reach all of those different needs and objectives. So before we get to that motion, James, I just really wanted to say thank you to the staff and really thank you to the county for taking time out. I know they met with several of us. So taking some time out of their busy days to meet with us and kind of help inform us of what their objectives are. So yeah, Andrew.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I didn't want to raise my hand until you're done. I apologize.
You can cut me off whenever you want, Andrew. I talk too much anyway.
No, I was wondering if we could do separate motions. I don't want to make it too onerous, but in my conversations in the county that you mentioned before and other people, I don't think people are identifying these are two different project areas that look very, very different. And this may be symbolic, but I think doing separate motions might be helpful just to make sure they're clear that they're different.
I think that's fine. I'll look for, then let's do this. I will look for a motion on agenda items 2 and 3, which are the 9-line interlocal with both Salt Lake City and the school district.
Madam Chair, I think that was my initial intent was not to include the other project area that we were discussing in the motion. It was just to include the first 2 resolutions for the 9-line project areas. So yes, that would be my motion, is to move forward with that.
Okay, I have a motion from Board Member Rogers. Do I have a
Second.
A motion of a second from Board Member Johnston. We'll go ahead and roll call this. Board Member Rogers. Board Member Wharton.
Aye.
Board Member Dugan.
Yes.
Board Member Johnston.
Yes.
Board Member Mano.
Yes.
Board Member Valdemoros.
Yes.
And I am a yes, so that passes unanimously. Moving on, I would look for a motion on agenda items 4 and 5, which are resolutions involving the interlocal between Salt Lake City and the interlocal between the school district for the State Street project area.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I move that we approve the both motions. Oh wait, what is it? Both ordinances.
Resolutions. We got you. We got you.
Thanks.
I have
I'll second it.
a motion by Board Member Mano. Do I have a second?
Yes, I
I
second.
have a second by Board Member Dugan. Again, I'll go ahead and roll call this. Board Member Johnston.
Yes.
Board Member Dugan.
Yes.
Board Member Valdemoros.
Yes.
Board Member Wharton.
Yes.
Board Member Mano.
Yes.
Board Member Rogers.
Yes.
See how I never that would pass. I'm a yes, and that passes unanimously. See how I never go in order? Got to keep you all on your toes. Okay, with that, we will move on to agenda item number 6. And again, before moving on, I just want to say thank you. These project areas have been in the works for a long time. There's been a lot of hard work put into these project areas. I look forward to working with the county and their participation. And I think that these are going to be really good project areas and something that we as board members can look back 20 years from now and be proud of. So good work, everybody. And we'll look forward to more updates on these. With that, we will move to agenda item number 6, which is an update to the RDA percent for art policy. Danny and Tracy Tran, I will turn it over to you two.
Correct. Thank you, Madam Chair. This item before the board today is to present a proposed update to the agency's public art policy. Our purpose today is for the board to review and comment on the policy, and our intention then would be to incorporate those comments into a final draft that we would return for approval. So I believe Tracy has a slide that we can put up. It is included in your packet as well, and she will walk through the structure of the proposed policy, how it would be implemented, both within the different levels of agency projects and participation, as well as in conjunction with the Arts Council. So with that, I will turn it over to Tracy.
Great, thanks, Danny. Let me just get this set up real quick. All right, can you see this RDA art policy? Okay. Oops. All right. Sorry, I was trying to get it to full screen, but that should work. Let's see. So just to give some background, the RDA board adopted an art policy in 1990 that follows the city's percent for art provision in chapter 2.30 of the Salt Lake City Code, which designates 1% of capital improvement projects to go towards art. We are proposing an update to the RDA art policy to follow along with some of the changes that the Arts Council is working on with the city code, which bumps the 1% requirement to a 1.5% for capital improvement projects. And we're also looking to include some additional tools and incentives to promote art within our RDA project areas. Historically, in addition to following the percent for art policy, the agency has included an art requirement for land disposition projects, and the board has also allocated additional art funding beyond the percent for art policy to fund additional art projects within project areas. An example of this would be the Granary murals project that was done a few years ago. So I'll quickly go over what we are proposing, which is laid out in this chart. So we have just a general purpose statement that discusses our desire to integrate art in public spaces and private developments within RDA project areas. We discuss the various types of art that may be possible, and we include a reference to Utah Code 17C to ensure how funds are used and how art is implemented follows what the RDA is authorized to do under state law. So basically, there are 3 components to this proposed policy. So we have an art requirement, an art incentive, and an option for the RDA board to allocate additional funds through our program income fund to fund art within project areas. So art will be required for all infrastructure projects and for Rda dispositions. So where 1.5% of the infrastructure projects and up to 1.5% of hard costs for Rda dispositions as determined through an RFP or RFQ would go towards art. And this aligns with the city's percent for art increase from 1 to 1.5% and this further specifies just a requirement for dispositions. As a way to incentivize art, we are proposing a 0.5% interest rate reduction if a developer contributes 1.5% of the RDA contribution of their project towards art. This would be a new addition within the policy to incentivize more art. So for both the art requirement and for the art incentive, developers would have the option of either installing art on site or contributing to an overall art fund. And if they are contributing to an art fund, the funds would be placed within a holding account until funds are appropriated by the board. The last item is an option for the RDA board to allocate additional program income funds or PIF funds each year for art within RDA project areas. This would be done through the annual budget process, and this option continues to allocate PIF funds as needed to supplement art, and it memorializes kind of current practice. So in terms of implementation, we split this up into 2 components, and we work really closely with the Arts Council in kind of figuring out this process since it hasn't been very clear in the past. So we split it up into 2 components, whether it's technically public art, so like art that's within a public right of way, or whether it's publicly visible art on private property. So for anything that's public art within a public right of way, that would be led by the Arts Council, and that would be reviewed by the Art Design Board. The ownership and maintenance would fall on Salt Lake City Corporation. And in terms of the fees, we would help provide up to 15% of the admin and up to 15% of maintenance to help cover the public art. And then for publicly visible art on private property, an example of this is the Granary Murals project that we did not too long ago. So that would be led by the RDA. We would create an Rda Art Review Committee that's kind of similar. We internally have like an RDA design review that we do on certain development projects. So we would kind of mirror something like that in order to review the art. And the ownership and the maintenance would fall on the private property owner in those cases. And there wouldn't be any fees since we would be running that process. And the only difference, and then in some off cases where we're partnering with a partner entity such as like UTA, we would work, some of the ownership and maintenance could be with that partner entity, but we'll work through those as we move forward. So at this time, I'm happy to take any questions or comments. As Danny had stated, our goal is to take any feedback from the board and come back at a future board meeting for potential adoption of a final policy.
Madam Chair, if I could jump in, I received a text from Felicia Baca, who is the director of the Arts Council. I think she is in the waiting room of the meeting if council staff haven't already let her in, but if the board wishes to speak to her or hear from her, I think we just need to let her into the meeting as a presenter. So just wanted to let everyone know that she is available.
Great, thank you. And if, Amanda, can you let Felicia in? It's so weird saying it this way. But...
Hi there. I don't see Felicia in the waiting room right now, but I can send her a link to join if that's okay.
Of course.
Okay, I'll do that right now.
Thank you. Do I have any questions at this time from board members? Darren?
Sorry, I'm always asking questions. So the main difference is that it goes on public, so community improvement projects and land dispositions. It goes from 1% to 1.5%. And then also there's a new thing on projects that do not fall into those two categories, where if they use 1.5% of their RDA's contribution for art, then they get a 0.5% rate reduction. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, so that would be, I'm sorry, that would be specific
be on
to
private
a
development.
loan. Yeah, that would be specific to like a loan program.
What do we know, like the average of how long developers are holding the RDA loans? Like how many years? Do they typically hold them for 15 years? In which case, I think
that's a great question. I don't know the true average off the top of my head, but we have some loans that have gone the full term. Most of those are usually more geared towards either affordable housing or nonprofit loans, because they're baked into what the public benefit is, or the housing side of it. Private loans, we tend to have a lower term. Our loan program is currently structured that those loans are hopefully 5 years, or they can be extended to 10 years. But I would say most of those private loans are less than 10 years.
Okay. Yeah, I think because this tool seems like it's going to be really good for developers who intend to hold their loan for multiple years, but actually maybe not very good if they're going to use a construction loan and refinance it. So
yeah,
I like the idea. I like the concept. I want to make sure it's a tool that works, and also a tool that doesn't. I mean, if it's a 30-year loan, that would end up costing us a ton for that small initial art investment. So I like the concept. I'm just wanting to make sure that 0.5% reduction is thought through, and that's accurate. And I guess I'll have to just trust staff that it is, unless you have some details as to why it's that.
It's certainly something I think we can always review and come back to. The justification for the 0.5% reduction in the loan is within our loan program. That's what any of those criteria get. So whether it's, the transit or public art, so it's not specific to just public art. It's kind of what the norm is for any of those benefits, that if the board chooses to approve that they've hit that mark, then they qualify for that reduction. So.
Thanks.
Keaney, are these, I know we've tried to make sure that this policy is pretty parallel to the city policy. Have we maximized that parallelism? I just made that word up. Have we maximized those parallels?
Yeah, I think hopefully we can get Felicia in the meeting, because I think she can speak to that. There's a few points there. I think we kind of jumped out ahead of where I believe that conversation is fully on the city side. One of the reasons we jumped, and Tracy, please correct me if I say this wrong, one of the reasons we bumped ours up to the 1.5% is because it was our understanding is that that's the intention of where the city program is going to go. So we wanted to be consistent with that. Number one. Number two, in working with the Arts Council and Felicia, really our biggest concern there was to make sure that we had that differentiation between what is going to be truly public art and potentially owned and maintained by the city, and provide a structure for that really doesn't necessarily exist right now on the city side, as Felicia works with different city departments in implementing public art. So we kind of are using this program as an example and a test case for what that could look like with other city departments, such as when the Arts Council coordinates with the airport or other public infrastructure projects, and how art is treated not only within that project, but also within the budget, as well as the maintenance side of things. And so we may have taken a little bit of a creative step forward, but our goal in working with the Arts Council was to do it in a way that is consistent with what they are trying to push through the rest of the ordinance. And Felicia has perfect timing to jump on to correct me on all of that I got wrong.
Hi, Felicia. Thank you for joining us.
Hi. I had a couple of hiccups in joining, but I think what Danny said is true. We're just trying to make city policy a little bit more consistent in that right now we have the CIP process through the public art program with the Arts Council. Process doesn't necessarily exist for necessarily other departments outside that process. For example, the or public utilities. So I think this is a step in the direction of creating some consistency in process, but it also creates some clear definitions of, you know, ownership of the artwork. If it is public art in the public right of way, then we run that process through the Arts Council as it exists. But when it may be another, you know, a private developer, the RDA has the flexibility to run that process through their own committee, which also gives us the advantage of expediting projects. Right now, the Arts Council board and staff wouldn't have the bandwidth or capacity, or sometimes the flexibility to shorten the timeline of a process for a variety of reasons. So creating these two sort of structures that have clear boundaries where we can advise on one or sit on a committee, it can be helpful. And I think we have a little bit of, you know, places for improvement, but this puts us on a really good route to, you know, having that policy in place with the RDA and helping them to achieve goals outside the Arts Council.
Excellent. Do we have other questions on this? I know that we will be hearing more of this policy as we kind of work out some of those little kinks and any of the feedback that board members may have, or as Felicia mentioned, that the Arts Council may come up with as far as kind of coordinating this as parallel as we can with the city, and then we'll be coming back with a proposed resolution, I would imagine. Is that right, Danny and Tracy?
Yeah, based on anything we hear today, our next steps would be to simply return with it along with the resolution for approval. So if there are any other questions, comments, or if board members think of anything after the meeting, we're happy to incorporate that in as part of the final discussion.
Perfect. So again, if you do come up with anything, as always, I would encourage you to reach out to Danny and Tracy and their team, and Felicia, if there's any questions that come up after this meeting. Thank you for joining us, Felicia. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's good to see you all.
Good to see you. If there are no other questions on that, we'll move to agenda item number 7. Actually, before we move to agenda item number 7, I'm going to switch things up, keeping everybody on their toes. Let's do agenda item number 7, and we'll go from there with a couple of things.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. This item is our notice of funding availability and recommendations for allocation of those funds to projects. With that, appreciate you keeping us in order, because that allows us to just keep Tracy right here. And both Tracy and Lauren are here to present and speak to this. And if you have any questions, we'll jump on in at any time.
Great. Thanks, Danny. Let me just pull up. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I able to share some content?
Oh, sure. I have it as well if you'd like me to pull it up, but I can make you the presenter, Tracy.
Yeah, that'd be great if that's okay. All right. Were you able to see that? Just some slides on the NOFA. Okay, great.
And Tracy, we can see that really well. I can't see everybody's hands. So as per usual, when we have these kind of presentations, I would just ask board members if you have a question at some point during Tracy's presentation, if it's okay with Tracy, just politely interrupt. You don't have to ask me for permission because I can't see it anyway. But if that's okay, then that's kind of how we'll run that, please.
Great, thank you. So this year, we released approximately 3.9 million through a Notice of Funding Availability, or NOFA, for the development of affordable housing within Salt Lake City. So 1.3 million came from the tax increment funds, and 2.59 million came from the Funding Our Future sales tax funds. This competitive process was released on June 17th of this year, with applications due on August 6th, 2020. These funds were marketed similarly as last year's NOFA process and included listing the call for proposals on the Utah Public Procurement website, as well as online marketing, email blasts, and holding an online developer information meeting. So this year we received 2 applications with a request of 2.42 million. And this year, since the NOFA included 2 funding sources, both the sales tax and the tax increment, this year's selection committee was comprised of an interim hybrids selection committee with representatives from both the Housing Trust Fund Advisory Board and the RDA Finance Committee / Redevelopment Advisory Committee. It included members from RDA, HAND, and CAN within this selection process. So the application review is based on the NOFA policy that was adopted by the board in 2018. And just to kind of quickly go over some of the requirements. So within the threshold requirements, we looked at eligible applicants, development team experience, eligible projects, whether or not they had site control of the property, design and city code requirements, and a minimum affordability requirement where at least 20% of the units are at 60% AMI or below, a funding maximum, and they had to meet at least 2 project priorities, excuse me. And this was established by the board within that policy. So throughout the selection, we evaluated and reviewed the projects, or the selection committee evaluated and reviewed the projects. And they looked at the alignment with project priorities and the overall impact, the content and quality of the application, again, the experience of the development team, the financial need and viability, project readiness, and just the content regarding building and site design for the projects. So right now, I'll turn it over to Lauren, and she can kind of dive in a little more with the details of the 2 applications that we received.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. So as Tracy just mentioned, we received 2 applications this year, and the first $1.5 million loan request came from developer Peter Caroon to accommodate the construction of a 110-unit apartment building at 144 South 500 East, seen here on the map. And the apartment building features some retail space on the first floor and co-working space for tenants on the second floor. 20% or 22 of the 110 units fall at 50% AMI, or the average area median income. And then if we can go to the next slide. The RDA loan request equates to approximately $68,000 of per affordable unit, and around 6% of the total project cost. And this project did meet at least 2 of the NOFA project priorities that Tracy went over. Per the primary lender, or HUD's loan requirements, the applicant requested a 2-year interest-only construction loan that would roll over into permanent financing with a 40-year amortization period and term, and cash flow repayments at 1% interest. So the selection committee reviewed this back in August and recommended approval of funding with the specific conditions that you see here. The main one being that the HUD loan must be obtained within the non-extendable 12-month conditional commitment period with the RDA, as this is the project's largest funding source. So that's the first project, and then we can move on to the second project, which is Pendleton Place, and we received a $920,000 loan request from the Housing Authority of Salt Lake City. This is a 74-unit shared housing or single-room occupancy type development at 1725 South Jefferson Street. All of the 74 units would be affordable at 40% AMI. And the RDA loan request equates to about $12,400 per affordable unit and 13% of the total project cost. An interest rate of 1.5 was requested with a 30-year loan term and amortization period, and then hard repayments. And the next slide. So ultimately, the selection committee recommended against approval of this funding request because the proposed use or this type of shared housing is not allowed in the RMF 35 underlying zoning district. However, the committee really did see value in this project, and they encouraged the applicants to bring back their request when and if the NOFA is released again and the zoning is addressed in the future. So for the affordable housing NOFA policy, the RDA board shall make the final selection of projects to receive funding, and then they'll enter into a conditional commitment period with the RDA. If the RDA board follows the selection committee's recommendation, there will be around $2.4 million left from this NOFA period that could potentially go out for a second round in the winter or spring. So I think we can take any questions that you all might have.
Lauren, I have a question. This last project said that the commission, well, first of all, the Salt Lake, the Housing Authority of Salt Lake City, it's not related to the city, correct? It's a separate entity. Okay.
Yes, it's separate.
Okay, so it's not a city-related entity. Okay. And then the second question is, the committee didn't recommend approval, so denied it, but to come back with a different proposal that it's conforming in terms of zoning, that it's conforming.
Right, because the use just isn't permitted right now in that RMF 35 zone. And so if they can somehow figure out if it's a rezone or whatever it may be, they saw value in the project and liked the project and thought that it met the NOFA criteria, but it was just not meeting that zoning, so.
But then you mentioned that we as a board could potentially approve it, even if the commission had recommended not approval or non-approve. Okay.
Yes, you have the final decision.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have the final approval on this, but not on the zoning change. It still need to get approved for the zoning. That'd be separate approval from the city council, right?
Right, that's a separate process that goes through planning commission and ultimately city council. Mm-hmm.
Right, okay.
I mean, ultimately, I really like this project. It does seem put maybe the cart before the horse in some ways of zoning and then funding, or funding and then zoning. So it does give me some concern, and not that we haven't done it before in some ways, but I do have a little bit of concern, although I love the idea of this particular project in this particular area, where I do think that we're seeing a little bit in this area, as I'm looking at the Google Maps of it and what's around there, we are seeing a little bit more of some opportunity areas in that area, right? Some opportunity zones. I know it's not an opportunity zone, but there's a little bit more access to transportation and things kind of around in that area. Not totally, but at least a little bit more. So I like the project. I just do have some concerns about the process and what we need to do there. I don't have an answer for it, so just throwing that out there. Darren?
Do we have can you sort of remind me where we are with the shared housing ordinance? Is that fully approved or we're still waiting on that? Because that's an entirely new ordinance that would need to be approved for this project to be able to be built, right? Or is that already done? I forget exactly.
No, I was just going to jump in and say that I think this one is slightly different because it's not just a change of zoning as much as that use is not even allowed within the ordinance right now. And
like anywhere in the city, it's not allowed, right? So I think that while I agree with a lot of things that Madam Chair said, I kind of think it's putting the cart really far in front of the horse. And so I wouldn't feel comfortable tying up that money when other projects might come in that could use that funding in the meantime.
I was trying to be nice, Darren. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. No, I appreciate it. And Andrew, I'm going to get to you real quick. I'm wondering if Jen or someone on our staff can tell us where we are with that shared housing ordinance.
That's it will be on the council's agenda in one of the October meetings. I can't remember which one, but we did receive it. So.
Okay, that's helpful. Andrew?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's probably a developer's question if they're available, but why would they apply this early for the RDA funding before everything else? Is there an answer for that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And if you recall, as part of the NOFA policy, we somewhat put that as one of the ways that the NOFA funds could be utilized for projects that are still in the process of seeking funding. That's why we try to release it right after the budget is approved so that housing developers can actually try to secure NOFA funds prior to them applying for tax credits as well. And so it is set up to where it can be a funding commitment subject to very specific conditions that do allow them either to continue to seek funding, finalize some of the issues with the site acquisition or development, as well as just know that they have that commitment moving forward and early on. So it is a game of how early it makes sense to provide that commitment, but it was something that we wanted to provide as part of putting it out as a competitive process once or twice a year.
Do we know if these folks went for a LIHTC process? Is that part of it or something else?
I think they plan on applying, but I don't think it was in this year's cycle. So I think it'll have to be next year. And I think that was part of the discussion with the selection committee was that it seemed like they were pretty early on and that they would have to seek some additional approvals and before getting to a place where I think our funding would make sense.
Okay. So the next round of LIHTC funding for the 9% is next September. So they got about a year. So in that meantime, they could go, depending on what happens with the council process, they could come back to us probably in plenty of time to have that lined up if they wanted that to support that application. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And Danny, to your point, sometimes some of this funding, especially when people are doing affordable housing, this commitment is helpful for them to go get other financing. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's the intention, is that allows them to score higher in the tax credit process, as well as showing that they have commitment for funding as they reach out to other partners as well.
And I just wanted to note that even with the LIHTC applications, it is required that they have to meet the zoning that's in place. So they wouldn't have been able to meet that. They would have not been able to meet that requirement even in this year's cycle if they had applied because they don't meet the zoning.
Okay. And then Danny, I know we've been trying to put out a NOFA twice a year. Is that our goal?
Well, it's still pretty new. I think last year we just did one, but I think as we've talked about, both with the initial budget allocation and then potentially in years like this where we may not spend all of that with the initial application, that we would then kind of gather up those funds and do another issuance of the NOFA somewhere mid-year. And then that would also align with when we may receive other housing contributions from Inland Port or other sources that we could then put out mid-year.
I see Tammy popped on, so she knows more than you anyway, Danny.
Well, I was just going to remind the board about the conversation for the new housing allocation policy and housing development trust fund program. So this was kind of an interim process that we put together with the joint selection committee. But ultimately that policy, those two policies that will come to you within the next couple of months, will outline the process more clearly in terms of both how often we'll issue the NOFAs and the selection committee process.
So a couple more follow-up questions. I'm sorry, do other board members have questions right now? I didn't mean to overstep any board members. And a couple more questions, Tammy, or Danny, or whoever wants to answer them on the RDA staff. Sorry, my dog is walking in here, so you hear the click, click, clack. But were there other applications that would maybe have a little bit less complications in us just giving them their funding that were passed over because of this particular application? And it seems to me that this particular application would most likely also qualify for our housing trust fund development dollars when that came out next year and still be in line with getting their other financing and their tax credits. Would that be somewhat accurate to say? The second part, and then the first part was a question.
I think that's accurate, if I can jump in. And these are the only two applications that we received this year. So there was none taken out. They both met the threshold requirements. And well, technically this one doesn't meet the zoning, but we forwarded the two that we received.
And I don't know if Tracy or Lauren have more details on this, but we did hear from the development community that developers are a little bit gun shy with moving forward with projects right now because of COVID. And we've heard that the residential market is still pretty hot, but people are a little hesitant right now to pull the trigger on finalizing funding and assembling funding sources. So we think that combined with maybe uncertainty around the election had a lower application rate than last year. Last year, we actually got 20 million or 25 million worth of applications. So this year was significantly lower.
Okay. Are there other questions from board members regarding these two applications? What is our timeline on this as far as straw poll, approval, resolution? I don't, somebody will tell me what I'm supposed to ask for. But what's the timeline on these? We can put it out whenever we want to, right? Or do we have people waiting and needing this?
Tracy, you want to jump in?
Are you just talking about general NOFA application process or?
These two applications.
Oh, these two applications. I'm sorry, my computer is breaking up a little bit. Can you say that one more time?
Yeah, just these two applications and if they're time sensitive.
So I don't, so neither one of them applied for the LIHTC, so they're not subject to that, but I believe the Peter Curran project is looking to move forward within the next year or so. So, and I could see Peter Curran on here if he wanted to speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, we are trying to move.
Sorry, if you'll just take a couple of minutes there, because we do have to move forward, but I would like to know sort of your timeline.
Sure. So we have a commitment from the county already, and we've applied for the Olin Walker funds. That comes, I think, towards the end of next month. And so we're trying to get things lined up as fast as possible. We've actually already requested for this project twice and been turned down, so we're hoping to get it moving. we have an application into HUD as well. So, you know, the more commitments we have in place, the easier it is to get the other funding. So, yeah, I'd say we're ready to get this thing going, even though you're never sure how long it will take. And you know, one of the things that I've tried to do is look at the tax credit application process, and it just where the state of tax credits are right now in the economy, it's hard to get decent funding for tax credits. So I'm actually trying to do this project outside of the tax credit process.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate that. Well, I will look to the board. Dan?
All right, can we make these two separate motions? Is that what we're gonna do? Just two separate motions, right?
Dan, I think you can do whatever you want with this.
Yeah, Dan, I think we just move forward with Peter Karun's development and let it go back out to notice for the other.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you, James.
I would maybe, that's the motion on the table, or the straw poll. Motion, do you need a motion or a straw poll, Danny? Or Allison or Katie or whoever wants to correct me?
It's a resolution, and I believe that motion is reflected in the resolution right now.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table for approving the resolution for the NOFA for the first project. What is the address of that project? 155 South 500 East.
144 South 500 East.
With Andrew seconding that. So that is our motion for right now. We're just going to deal with the project of 144 South 500 East. Right. I will roll call. So Board Member Dugan.
Yes.
Board Member Mano.
Yes.
Board Member Valdemoros.
Sorry, I thought it was unmuted. Yes.
Board Member Johnston.
Yes.
Board Member Wharton.
Yes.
Board Member Rogers.
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so that is approved. Now let's go to.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Congratulations, Peter. Good luck. Let's move to the project 1725 Jefferson Street. Do I have a motion regarding that, NOFA? We can also hold it. We don't have to get rid of it right now. We can table it and come back to it. If we had two applications and only two applications, we can certainly sort of put this in a little, we can come back to it at a later date in a different agenda item. We don't have to make a decision today. If that helps any board member.
Does it make any, Madam Chair, does it make any changes in the process for them?
I don't believe it would make any changes. I will ask Danny.
It doesn't necessarily make any changes. I think it would probably be better from a clarity standpoint for the board to take action on whether it's you're not going to approve the funding and or if you're going to provide some type of earmark or commitment for it. I should note that I think the motion that you just took on, unless you separate it, if you approve the resolution, then the resolution is already just approving funding for the first project. So whatever you do as part of this discussion is in addition to that. And so it doesn't change anything on our end other than to what extent we may or may not earmark funds based on what direction the board provides as far as a commitment to give.
Got it. I think too, if we're discussing the ordinance regarding shared housing in October, it may make sense in some ways. I mean, we can to come back at least for, I realize that we're kind of issuing the funds and you can do whatever, but maybe holding it right now, earmarking that right now and coming back till after we have a council discussion on the shared housing ordinance.
I hear what you're saying, Madam Chair. I guess my gut instinct is to take action and decline it now on my part, and then but intend them to come back to us because I think it's a decent idea, but there seems to be quite a few administrative hurdles for them to get through. And at that point, if they come back to us, their funding model may change slightly. They may necessitate some changes in the application. I don't know if that's true or not, though.
Well, it sounds like that's a motion on the table.
I can make the motion. I motion that we support the recommendation not to approve this particular request.
I second it.
Okay, I will roll call. Board Member Wharton?
Yes, I am in favor. Wait, okay. I don't remember how the question was phrased, but I am in favor of denying this.
I made the motion to support the recommendation from the RDA staff that we decline, that we that we not approve this.
Oh, yes, I'm a yes.
Board Member Dugan?
Yes.
Board Member Mano?
Yes.
Board Member Valdemoros?
Did we already pass the time to for discussion? Sorry, I just have a clarifying question for this motion from staff, if that's okay. Is that okay?
Yes.
So if this is not get approved today, when they come back in the future, do they have to go through the whole process again and submit a full application again? And I mean, even if it's in 3 months, I mean, it sounds like it's a lot of work for something that we want to see in the future.
Well, can I? What? Never mind. I'll let staff answer.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Sorry, yes, they would have to, and because this is a NOFA, it's a competitive process, it would be required for everyone to go through the same process. I'm pretty sure it's very unlikely that they will have a project ready within 3 months, given the zoning issues that we see. And we do like to see projects submitted in full, because if any component of this project changes, it could completely change their ask for the RDA. It could completely change just their financial model for the project. So yes, I mean, they would have to resubmit regardless.
Okay. All right. I think my only request on it would be that if RDA staff can stay in touch with them, to see if there's interest as they clear out those little hurdles that they need to go through, because I think it's in an area that needs it and can use this type of housing. So thank you, and and I'm a yes then.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Valdemoros. I don't remember who I haven't gotten to now.
Me.
Board Member Rogers. Christy, you're muting. Sorry.
Yes.
All right, I have a yes from Board Member Rogers. I am a yes to that motion. I think we have everyone there, and so that would pass as well. Danny, was that clear as mud?
We can make that work. Thank you.
I see that Madam Mayor joined us. Thank you, Mayor, for joining us today. I am going to see where we're at on time. Give me 1 second. I think we're going to skip around a little bit. We do need a motion to ratify the determination that the board will continue to meet remotely and without an anchor location under HB 5002. And I am just going to read a declaration and then ask for a motion out of that. We probably, that as the chair of the Board of Redevelopment Agency, I would hereby determine that conducting the Board of the Redevelopment Agency meeting at an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at that anchor location. The World Health Organization, the President of the United States, the Governor of Utah, the Salt Lake County Health Department, Salt Lake County Mayor, and the Mayor of Salt Lake City have all recognized a global pandemic exists related to the strain of the coronavirus CoV 2. Due to the state of emergency caused by the related new strain of, caused by the global pandemic, I find that conducting a meeting at an anchor location under the current state of public health emergency constitutes a substantial risk to the health and safety of any of those who may be present at that location. With that, I would ask for a motion to approve this declaration pursuant to HB 5002.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move that the board continue to meet without an anchor location.
Second.
I have a motion from Board Member Wharton, and I believe that was a second from Board Member Rogers. I will go ahead and roll call this. Board Member Wharton?
Yes.
Board Member Valdemoros?
Yes.
Board Member Johnston?
Yes.
Board Member Dugan?
Yes.
Board Member Mano?
Yes.
Board Member Rogers? I think that was a yes, but it kept muting, so I'm going to take that as a yes. And I'm a yes, so that passes unanimously. Thank you. At this time, I would I would look for a motion to enter into a closed session regarding the potential property strategies for property acquisition, exchange, or lease, and attorney-client matters.
Madam Chair, I move that we go into executive session, closed session for the purpose of discussing acquisition of property and to receive advice of counsel.
Second.
I have a motion from Board Member Wharton and a second from Board Member Rogers. Again, roll call this. Board Member Mano?
Yes.
Board Member Valdemoros?
Yes.
Board Member Wharton?
Yes.
Board Member Johnston?
Yes.
Board Member Dugan?
Yes.
Board Member Rogers?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so that we will enter into closed session. For anybody who is watching, we will be back after our closed session. And for those who are participating, I would ask that if you know you don't need to be in this meeting, oh no, there's a separate link, isn't there, Jen?
I was just going to say there's this time there's a separate link, and so you'll use that link to enter into the closed session, and then you'll use this same link to come back into this meeting. Is that right, Bobby? Hopefully, or Amanda. Hopefully that's right.
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Good.
Everyone.
So everyone that needs to be in the meeting, please join us in the closed session.
So this is looking from Third South toward the building. In Woodbine Street, which we'd be standing on here, actually wraps around the building. So our infrastructure has been designed around it to preserve these view corridors. And the building also, like I mentioned before, reinforces the character of this historic warehouse district. Next slide. So the building sustained some serious damage during the earthquake this year. Weaveley engineers conducted a post-earthquake observation and saw and documented significant damage to some unreinforced masonry elements and also portions of the building that appeared to be at the threshold of collapse. So RDA staff have been working with one of our on-call architects, GSBS, to evaluate options for stabilizing the building so it can be preserved as we evaluate options for renovating the building in the future. Next slide. Our request is for the board to consider approving the use of some of the Station Center funds that were reallocated as part of the Budget Amendment 4 to the fiscal year 20 budget this May to stabilize the structure with shoring and bracing until a developer is selected for Station Center. The preliminary cost estimate for the stabilization is $865,000, and that includes $365,000 for construction of the stabilization system and another $500,000 for the shoring equipment that will be in place until the building's renovated. So right now we're assuming that purchasing the shoring equipment will be more cost effective than renting it on a monthly basis, but a detailed cost analysis will be completed as part of the design of the stabilization system, and we'll choose the lowest cost option for the project. So that is information we will have farther along in the design. So I noted here that the shoring equipment will stay in place until the building is renovated. And we imagine there are a few ways this renovation could take place in the future. So if we could go to the last slide, Amanda. Our preliminary cost estimate for renovating the building to a seismically upgraded shell is $3.4 million. So I think next steps could be to determine what the RDA's role might be in that renovation. We could stabilize the building like we've discussed here, and then include it in the larger Station Center project in the redevelopment plans for Station Center. We could stabilize the building and issue a separate RFP for a developer to renovate the building. Or following stabilization, we could complete the renovation and then issue an RFP for the renovated building. So that is my last slide. And I don't know if Danny wants to add anything or if there are any questions.
No, I think we can open it for questions and provide more information as we get into those answers.
Darren? You're on mute, darling.
Sorry, thanks. Is the 3.4 million estimate to refurbish the building to a usable state, or that's just to do the seismic upgrade and then they'd still have to do their tenant improvements and all that?
It is to do the seismic upgrade and then I think minimal mechanical and let's see, I think just to a shell state. And so the tenant improvements would still be required after that.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I was afraid of.
And I think it's,
and then the, oh.
No, please go ahead.
And then on top of that 3.4 is the 860,000 to just hold the building steady.
Correct. That's exactly what I was going to say. Is right now we're talking about the 865,000 to just stabilize it and provide the opportunity to further evaluate what that 3.4 million would be, what it would include, as well as options for how we think we could then incorporate that into the project.
And how much would it cost to level that building and just build a very a similar building of the same shape, size, and architecture?
That's impossible.
We'll take that answer. Karen wants to stick with that answer. Yeah, I'm not going to speculate on what the construction would be. Maybe Director Mono can jump in and say what that might be as far as, construction. Demolition would probably be in the neighborhood of 150,000 if I was just guessing. And then construction of a new building would be, what, a couple million, Darren? Yeah.
Or could you just keep up the facade, the front facade, and like an old Western, just hold up the front side and everything back?
You certainly could look at doing a facade-ectomy or saving portions of the exterior. But I think obviously we'd prefer to do more of an adaptive reuse of the entire building and try to incorporate all of it or as much of it as possible. And we, to your point, I don't mean to dismiss the question. I just don't have an answer off the top of my head. But Director Dugan, we could certainly provide that information when we come back to the board with that further analysis of what restoration would cost. I'm more than happy to say this is what a new building would be, and then here are the options for restoring it. And I think that would be a good information to have at that time.
One more, James. I'm all in favor of remodeling and retrofitting old buildings. I love old architecture. I love walking through Europe and seeing churches and buildings from the 1700s modernized. But when I look at this building, I go, oh, it's kind of a square box that doesn't, to me, has a lot of personality. It may say, the mattress company sign, we could redo that, but the rest of the building to me doesn't seem to have a lot there to offer that just a more modern, more efficient building would for probably a similar or a lesser cost. That's just my unprofessional opinion.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I'm going to go James and then Darren. We have 5 minutes and still 2 other things on our agenda. So I hate to rush us along, but I try to hold these meetings as efficiently as possible. So, Mr. Rogers, if you...
2 points that I've got, Madam Chair, and that is the number one is we went on an excursion, a Downtown Alliance excursion to Boston, and we saw how they were using adaptive reuse with old buildings and new so they could go up and do mixed use, right? So my question is, with this warehouse, we're looking at a whole new height restriction in that area in Station Center anyway. Is that something that we should be looking at? Because I really do like the idea. You look at the Celtic Bank on 3rd South where they save the facade and then put some residences up in there. I believe it's residences and office space. But I think that Board Member Dugan is onto something here where we're looking at height. Let's look at, doing that adaptive reuse, but adding, old with new, like what we saw in Boston.
Either way, in order to do that, we would need to do this shoring and stabilization, correct? Okay. Darren?
Yeah, I hear what Board Member Dugan's saying. I think it is a high price tag. You're pushing, by the time you do the whole thing, you're pushing $400 a square foot, maybe, if it's a really nice TI. But you can't rebuild historic buildings. It's impossible to save that historic fabric. And so I do think it's worth putting the money into at least so it doesn't fall over tomorrow, and then we can have that discussion if the $3.4 million is worth it, or if we just save pieces of it. But I hate to see old buildings go away.
Andrew?
I'll support the motion to, if it comes before us, to stabilize the building right now. But I agree. I think we've got multiple old buildings across the city that are historic that we haven't put any money into. And so I would hate to have a conversation from the RDA board about this particular property and ignore everything else we've ignored for so long across the city. So that discussion is going to be much bigger outside of the RDA in my view.
Is that a straw poll, Andrew? Because I was going to ask to see if we wanted to hold a straw poll approving that $865,000 now.
Yes, I will move for a straw poll approving the $865,000 for building stabilization of the mattress building. But I may add a contingency that this in no way endorses that we will invest money to save the historic structure in the future.
I think that's fair. I don't need a second on a straw poll, so I will just ask for a thumbs up and then I'll go ahead and call it up. It looks like I've got everyone but Darren as a thumbs up. Okay, so that is a unanimous straw poll to go ahead and release those funds for the shoring up and stabilization of the mattress building. I'm going to skip agenda item number 9. We will have to put that on our October agenda and move to agenda item number 11. I'm looking for a straw poll on this item.
Madam Chair, I would like to make a straw poll that we release the funds in Station Center for property acquisition.
Okay. Again, just a thumbs up if you support that. And I've got 6 out of 7 thumbs. I've got 7 out of 7 thumbs up at this point. So that straw poll passes, and you can go forward with that. I do want to tell the board, I know that there are some policy questions around different acquisitions and different properties and things, and I'm happy to put those policy questions on an October or November agenda so that we can have some of that larger discussion. With that, we are on agenda item number 12, report and announcements from the executive director. Mayor, do you have anything for us today?
No, but I'm going to the next meeting.
Great. Report announcements from the RDA staff.
Yes, Madam Chair, if I may, I will be brief. Just a couple of quick announcements. The first is, I think, due to scheduling issues, we have a few personnel announcements we'd like to make. I think it's been a while since we've had the opportunity to do this. Most of you probably already know that Tammy Hunsaker has been promoted within our offices to be our Deputy Chief Operating Officer, and we certainly appreciate the Mayor's confirmation of that. I don't think Tammy knew I was going to put her on the spot because she probably thought she was in the safe zone. So I won't make her say anything, but I did at least want to recognize that within the meeting and provide her that embarrassment. So there she is. We won't make you do an acceptance speech, Tammy, unless you want to.
Just thanks for the opportunity.
And then we're also pleased to announce the hiring of Erin Keaney, who is here as well. She has been hired as our financial analyst. Erin has over 12 years experience in financial and strategic planning, ranging from American Express to small business to even private consulting. She has also, as part of all of those roles, been involved in HR and IT, and generally comes to us with a lot of experience of solving problems. And you as a board should be happy to know that no matter what Tammy and I have thrown at her in terms of what work she has ahead of her and the scope of her job duties, she continues to tell us it's not the worst she's ever seen. So I guess that's good for us, but you know, hopefully we can keep her interested. So there's Erin on the screen now, and Erin, I don't know if you want to say anything or introduce yourself or just say hi. But
I can just say hi. I think you said enough.
Normally, if we're in the meeting room, they generally try to have some questions and embarrass you, but I think we're going easy on everyone today. So, and then 2 other quick announcements, Madam Chair. We have had our selection advisory committee choose the pieces of art for the agency's Art for Hope SLC project. We have selected 42 message squares from several different artists. We are currently collecting all of those digital files and executing the necessary contracts. And we anticipate installing this art piece on the RDA properties across the city, hopefully by mid-October. And then we will also host an online gallery on our website of the pieces that have been submitted. So we're excited to get that project out and provide that opportunity for artists. And then some of you may be aware or had participated on September 15th. There was a virtual ribbon cutting for the Pamela's Place affordable housing development. over on 525 South and 5th West. You'll recall that the board last year approved a $500,000 loan for the 100-unit project. All 100 units are targeted to serve residents earning 30% or less of the area median income. The project also includes a 4,000 square foot medical clinic and common area space. And Council or Director Mono, I think we have confirmed that the residents are co-ed. And so that's the project that we have. So wanted to respond back to that question you had earlier in a meeting. So we're happy to see that project completed and put to service. So very, very excited to have been a part of that. That's all we have, unless there's any questions for us.
Excellent. Thank you. Tammy, congratulations. And Aaron, welcome aboard. I'm excited to get to know you and work with you. And I'm sure you may say you're excited now, but I will annoy you at some point. Just ask the rest of the staff. So, but welcome aboard. We're looking forward to that. I don't have any report from me. Anna, is there anything?
No, I don't have anything either. So.
Okay. I did want to say thanks for those announcements. Also, Danny, you know how much I like little feel goods to end our meetings. And these were a few little feel goods, being able to have that very important and impactful art project, murals around our city will be great. And of course, Pamela's Place is an awesome opportunity that we got to be a part of. So thanks for that. And with that, I will adjourn.
Congrats, Tammy. Welcome, Aaron.